Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalrin, and today I want to open up a conversation, something interesting to talk to you guys about. With all the nerfs that have come out for rogues as of recent, we've seen a continuation of nerfs, starting with a 30% agility nerf for Assassination, 10% nerf for all classes in the game, then 5% nerf to Assassination agility, and now we saw a 10% agility nerf to all 3 specs of rogue. So with rogues being nerfed, some specs are not really hit all that much by it, like being Outlaw. I'm not really feeling the nerfs that much, but when I swapped over to my Assassination rogue, which is the Alliance rogue, I saw that my damage for my ruptures was much lower than usual. So then we found out, oh hey, rogues got nerfed by 10% agility. So where does this nerf leave rogues? From what I've talked about with other rogues, Assassination rogues felt the nerf, but you still have a lot of pressure and a lot of burst damage if you're able to combo all the abilities together and exsanguinate your enemy. So Assassination burst isn't really feeling it, but the sustained damage definitely did take a hit. Subtlety, on the other hand, it doesn't really have that much burst. All you really have is sustained damage, and you can increase just how much pressure you're getting out of the sustained damage. But with this 10% agility nerf, Subtlety's damage have went down. Your Shadow Strikes went down from dealing 100k DPS on average to about 70k to 80k on average. So you are losing 20k damage with every single Shadow Strike, and you do end up falling behind because also your Nightblade took damage. I want to present you guys with an idea. So with the recent nerfs that have happened to rogues and nerfs and buffs that have happened to other classes, I want to propose to you a safe spec to play for PvP if you're one of those players that wants to have a safe, reliable spec to play when it comes to player versus player. First of all, I guess I should address what is a safe spec. Well, a safe spec will basically withstand the tides of time and tides of nerfs. No matter how many nerfs come out as the Legion expansion goes on, the spec is likely to stay afloat and be viable no matter what situation we are in. Because there's just so many mechanics that make this spec viable, where even if it were to be nerfed damage-wise, I feel like it would still be viable because of its utility, because of its CC, and many other components. And this video isn't really to get everybody to hop on playing Outlaw. I'm not really trying to get everybody to play Outlaw in this one. But if you're looking for a safe spec and you are afraid that, oh, you know, with all the nerfs, they might nerf my favorite spec, and I'm already investing so much artifact power into that spec, and you are going to be primarily PvPing in Legion, then if you really want a safe spec, this is just some ideas of what spec you should play. Before I go on to tell you exactly why I feel Outlaw rogues are a safe spec for PvP, let's take a look at the past of rogues. I'm going to talk about some of the trends that we've seen with rogues in the past, mainly from Warlords of Draenor and Mists of Pandaria as expansions from a PvP perspective, because those are the expansions that I was able to experience, so I want to be able to talk from experience rather than going through hypothesis of Wrath, BC, Vanilla, or any of the other expansions that I've never really played rogue in. When it comes to Season 1 of Mists of Pandaria, we saw a pretty big trend of rogues weren't viable. Season 1 of Pandaria made all 3 specs of rogues pretty garbage. The only spec that was able to somewhat shine and be somewhat viable was Subtlety. It wasn't because Subtlety had any damage, but mostly because it had access to burst. Because of Shadow Dance, you had access to Go Roads, you had access to Cheap Shots, you had access to Kidney, so you could combo yourself with a powerful DPS, like for example a Mage, get yourself a Druid or Priest healer, and you could go into arenas and make something out of it. Also with Subtlety being able to have decent CC, you had also somewhat decent damage when it came to your Shadow Dance. So you did have moments of burst, especially during Shadow Dance and during your opener. As the last season of Mists of Pandaria rolled out, Subtlety was the top of the crop. It was the best spec to play. It had great damage, you had great sustain, you had great CC, you were the best spec for PvP. But as you guys know, I played combat back in the day. And what made combat viable at the time was the fact that it had CC. It was a unique type of CC, not more CC, but more refined version of a Kraken Shell effect we all know today, which is Kidney Shot being an 8-second stun. With an 8-second stun Kidney and amazing burst from deep inside kill on spree combined with Shadow Blades, you could lock down a healer or a DPS with a little bit of cross CC and could nuke down the target. And that's basically what I ended up doing, is playing the Combat Rogue spec at the end of Pandaria season. The spec was viable because it had CC, so you saw similar trends of CC viability and decent burst once every blue moon, which were evident for both Combat Rogues and Subtlety Rogues in Season 1. Now let's take it back to Warlords of Draenor, where everybody played Combat Rogue. Combat Rogue was the best spec possible, where your toddler could play the spec. What happened was Subtlety wasn't as strong Season 1. Subtlety wasn't strong because it didn't have the sustained damage and the potential for massive burst that was unpeelable compared to combat rogues. So combat rogues were pretty damn strong at the time, but Subtlety was able to be playable as a lot of players wanted to keep playing Subtlety. And Subtlety was viable mostly because it had great CC and it had moments of great burst, whether it's in the opener or with Shadow Dance. And as Warlord's generally went on, Subtlety maintained to have this upper position when it comes to having massive amounts of CC, combination with Shadow Dance burst that you had and opener burst that you had. So Subtlety was viable throughout most of Warlord's general on that aspect alone. So in the past 2 expansions, we can see that CC and moments of burst, one of the things that makes a rogue spec viable, may not be the best rogue spec, but that was enough to make it viable. And currently we're in Legion, and I want to talk a little bit about what an Outlaw rogue can offer you when it comes to being the spec that might be eternal throughout the expansion. First thing we have to cover is CC. And let's be honest, Outlaw rogue has a lot of CC. If we take a look at the spellbook, we have everything from a Gouge, which is a 10-second cooldown, which can be free of energy if you talent yourself properly. Then we have Blind, which is a great CC, 15-yard range, also instant, no energy cost to it. And then we have an interesting ability for Between the Eyes, which is a range kidney shot, which can be used on the kill target. Let's say you're setting up a kill, you would end up stunning the kill target to lock it down. Or you can use it on someone like a healer or DPS for peels or cross CC. So already we've seen that Outlaw rogue has a range stun, a Gouge, which can be used to interrupt spells and lock out healers with a sap-like effect. We have Blind, which is of course a great CC. We still have sap, so it's one of the ways we can have our openers. And when we take a look at some of the other forms of CC, we take a look at the honor talents and we have Dismantle, which disarms the enemy, so you're able to counter melee. We also have Plunder Armor, which will make enemies deal 20% less damage, which is, I consider, in a somewhat of a way, a CC. So Outlaw rogues have great CC, but what else do they have? Next topic on the list was Decent Burst, and I feel like Outlaw rogue has Decent Burst, mainly because of Curse of Dreadblades combined together with the talent for Deeper Stratagem. Once you stun your opponent and you have abilities like Ghostly Strike on them so they take 10% more damage, you simply go through a rotation of pop Curse of Dreadblades, Saber Slash to fill up your combo points, then run through to burst into the enemy. Saber Slash, run through, Saber Slash, run through, and do this for as long as the stun allows you. You will also have ability to burst with Killing Spree, you have ability to stack passive damage with Alacrity, you have a capability to cleave burst with Cannibal Barrage in some ways, and generally your abilities deal a lot of damage, where Curse of Dreadblades is already an ability that gives you decent damage. So as a spec, you can also buff yourself for damage. Not only can you use Ghostly Strike for 10% damage increase, you can use Thick as Thieves to increase yours and a friendly target's damage by 15% for 6 seconds using Tricks of Trade, and Plunder Armor, which will increase your damage by 20%. So there's multiple different things that are coming together that will allow you for massive burst every blue moon, because most of these cooldowns, the longest one being is a 2-minute cooldown. So you have great CC, great burst, but what else does Outlaw rogue offer? You also have cooldown reduction. When we take a look at the Roll the Bones, we see that Roll the Bones comes with one of the buffs called True Bearing. And what True Bearing does is, with every finisher while this buff is active, every time you spend comp points into a finisher, you reduce the cooldown of major abilities. Major abilities being your CC, defensives, and offensives. So abilities like Adrenaline Rush would be reduced, Killing Spree would be reduced, your Cloak of Shadows can have its cooldown reduced, your Repose has its cooldown reduced, you have abilities where your Stun has a cooldown reduction as well, your Mark for Death cooldown reduction, and your Blind has a cooldown reduction element to it. So you can reduce a lot of your cooldowns when you get True Bearing. So not only do you have decent CC, you have decent burst, you have a way to get that CC and burst faster. So it's a question of what else can this spec offer you? Outlaw rogue also enforces a lot of team play, and it has interesting class and honor talents in order to enforce team play. Team play is something that not a lot of classes have. One of the best ones being abilities that are used in combination with other friendlies in your party. I guess the best example that most people would know is Bloodlust can be used by enhancement shamans on another target and can be used in BGs and arenas if you talent into it. So then with Bloodlust, you're able to give yourself haste, you're able to give your friendly haste, and you're able to go smash damage onto a single enemy. Well, Outlaw rogue is fairly similar, and it has a couple different options. You have Boarding Party, where Between the Eyes increase the movement speed of all friendly targets within 10 yards by 30% for 5 seconds. We have ability, as we talked before, Thick as Thieves. Your tricks of trade will now increase you and your friendly's target's damage by 15% for 6 seconds. You have abilities like Take the Cut, which is when you roll the bones. Every time you roll, allies within 8 yards get 50% more haste for 8 seconds. You can basically become a warlock and pass out your Crimson Vial to your friendlies. So not only does the spec have great CC, which we know has stood the tides of time in the past, once in a blue moon burst, which really does come together for rogues and is almost like a must. If a rogue wants to be very much viable, you need to have strong burst damage. We also have ability to have cooldown reduction for all of those elements, and you have a lot of capabilities for further team play, so you might be able to play with certain different comps that you never thought you'd be able to play with before. I feel like Outlaw rogues have a lot of flexibility because of how much crowd control they have, because of how much burst they have, because of the abilities that they have. That's probably the best way to put it. I feel like they're viable, and they will be viable no matter the season because of the abilities that they have. Because they have a lot of potential, and there's more than one way to play the spec. And that's basically the reason why I think you should give a try to Outlaw rogues, as it might be the spec that could be the safest one for PvP when it comes to Legion. Let me know what you guys think about this video. Let me know what you guys think about Outlaw. Do you think the spec is probably the safest one when it comes to staying consistent and being readily available when it comes to PvP? Always being good, never being the worst spec in the game, always being viable in one way or another. Let me know that in the comments below, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next one.